Upon the testimony of the early fathers and the government of the primitive church, we cannot at present enter, nor will our limits permit us to trace the gradual process by which prelacy was introduced and constantly advanced in proportion as purity declined, till it attained its full consummation in the papacy, nor to show, on the other hand, how at the era of the Reformation the prelatical establishment was constructed with certain modifications upon the model of the anti-Christian church, so that, as has been acutely remarked, prelacy is at once the mother and the daughter of popery. To the law and to the testimony we have made our appeal, and we shall cheerfully abide the result. If we have failed in the scriptural argument, we should scorn to protect our worthless head behind the ponderous tomes and folios of the fathers, and if we have succeeded on this high vantage ground, we can afford to let the fathers slumber on in their time-honored repose. And here a footnote. See note B. Number 2. We have come now to the consideration of the Erastianism of the Church of England, with which, as they are intimately connected, we may conjoin her discipline. The term Erastianism is derived from Erastus, a German divine of the 16th century. The pastoral office, according to him, was only persuasive, like a professor of science over his students, without any power of the keys annexed. The Lord's Supper and other ordinances were to be free and open to all. The minister might dissuade the vicious and unqualified from the communion, but might not refuse it, or inflict any kind of censure. The punishment of all offenses, either of a civil or religious nature, being referred to the civil magistrate. Hence, Erastianism is employed comprehensively to point out all unwarrantable interference by the civil magistrate in ecclesiastical matters. Now, while a prelatical church may exist, disconnected from the state as in Scotland and America, and thus be free from magistratical control, the United Church of England and Ireland is, as everyone knows, an established church, and in both her constitution and administration we prefer against her the charge of gross and palpable Erastianism. In her case, the civil magistrate has beyond doubt stretched forth his hand far, far beyond his legitimate province. We need not wait to say that we approve of the principle that the church and state should be united, nor enter upon any explanation of the terms upon which this union can alone be lawfully formed. That the church adopted by the state should, in doctrine, worship, discipline, and government, be reformed according to the gospel model. That the state itself, with which she is allied, should possess a moral and religious character, and that the nature of the alliance should be such as to leave her free and unfettered to perform all the duties required by her divine head, are principles which we consider ourselves at liberty to take for granted. Now the Church of England is faulty in all these particulars. In the first place, she is not such a church as should have ever been established in a Reformed Protestant land. In the second place, she is allied to the highly objectionable civil constitution. And lastly, the manner of her establishment is such as to convert her into a mere state engine. If there be any principle that believers of every name should maintain inviolate, it is surely this, that the Lord Jesus Christ is the sole King and head of his church, since the Father has set him as king over his holy hill of Zion, and given him to be the head over all things to the church, which is his body. It must be daring impiety for a creature to arrogate this high and holy prerogative, and detestable treason in any church to concede to such a claim for any secular advantages whatever. We blush to think, however, that this claim has not only been preferred by the sovereign of Great Britain, but that it is actually declared by statute to be an inalienable prerogative of the Crown, and that the Church, in her very articles, concedes, or more properly declares it in the broadest and most unqualified terms. The King, says Blackstone, and of course the Queen too, is considered by the laws of England as the head and supreme governor of the national church. That from the Commentaries on the Laws of England, Volume 1, page 278. The papal jurisdiction in England was destroyed by Parliament upon the express ground that the King's Majesty justly and rightly is, and ought to be, supreme head of the Church of England. The first of Elizabeth enacts that all jurisdictions, spiritual and ecclesiastical, should forever be united and annexed to the imperial crown, and in her 37th article, the Church endorses the impious claim. It runs thus: "The King's Majesty hath the chief power in this realm of England, unto whom the chief government of all the estates in this realm, whether they be ecclesiastical or civil, in all causes doth appertain." And here a footnote, plea 389. Thus do both Church and State agree in declaring it to be a fundamental principle of the Constitution that the King or Queen is supreme head in all causes civil and ecclesiastical. A more grossly unscriptural element, therefore, has been introduced into the Church of England than is to be found in that of Rome. In the fearful impiety of making a sinful mortal head of the Church, indeed, both have concurred. But then the head of the Church of Rome must be an ecclesiastic, and a man. Female popes are not esteemed quite canonical, whereas the head of the Church of England is a lay or civil person, and may be a man, a woman, or a child. Her Erastianism, therefore, is emblazoned on her very forehead. Now, from this polluted fountain of royal supremacy has flowed, as might have been expected, a copious stream of Erastian encroachment. Her clergy, for instance, have all their authority to rule and ordain from the sovereign. In 37 Henry VIII, cap. 17, it is declared that archbishops, bishops, archdeacons, and other ecclesiastical persons have no manner of jurisdiction ecclesiastical but by under and from his royal majesty, and that his majesty is the only supreme head of the Church of England and Ireland. Here a footnote, please 390 and 391. Words could not more explicitly declare that instead of having their authority from the Lord Jesus Christ, these dignitaries derive it immediately from a poor, erring mortal. What a humiliating position for the pretended successors of the apostles. Would the Apostle Paul have accepted a bishopric upon such terms? In exact accordance with this, we find that the clergy cannot meet in convocation without Her Majesty's permission. By the 25th Henry VIII, cap. 19, it is a prémunire, and here a footnote. Prémunire is the forfeiture of lands and tenements, goods and chattels, and imprisonment during the king's pleasure, a term derived from the prémunire in English writ for the purpose of repressing the papal encroachments on the power of the crown. It was authorized by statutes passed with a view to suppress that power, and from the first words of the writ, prémunire, facies, both the writ and the punishment received the name of a prémunire. Bell's Law Dictionary. How pressing soever the necessity, the prelates dare not meet in ecclesiastical assembly without leave asked and obtained from Her Majesty. And should she see meet to refuse, they must just even look helplessly on, and behold the Church, it may be, corrupted to the core with heresy, or torn in pieces with dissension. The idea of anything like discipline in such a church is out of the question. But even when met, they can enact nothing without Her Majesty's consent, nor publish that which has been enacted without her authority. If she disallow any of their decisions, they have no validity, and should those that she does ratify be thought to contain anything calculated to damage or hurt the royal prerogative, they are liable to the judgment of the courts of Westminster Hall, which decide upon their validity accordingly. And Howe, no mean judge, says, if ecclesiastical laws are not confirmed by Parliament, the king may revoke and annul them at pleasure. And here a footnote. See Togood's Dissent from the Church of England, page 21, and the Plea of Presbytery, pages 391 and 392, for further information. Thus are the powers of the clergy met in convocation, prostrated at the sovereign's feet, and for upwards of a century past, these assemblies have been altogether discontinued. Another proof of her Erastian bondage is that the appointment of all the bishops belongs to the sovereign. Upon the vacancy of a bishop's see, the king grants a license or congé d'élire under the great seat to the dean and chapter to elect the person whom by his letters missive he hath appointed, and they are to choose no other. Should they delay the election above 12 days, the nomination devolves on the king, who appoints the individual accordingly. And here a footnote. Blackstone's Commentary, Volume 1, page 378, as well as Buck's Theological Dictionary, article Bishop. While the congé d'élire is couched in the form of a request to the dean and chapter, no communication can be more imperative. They have no choice, in fact, in the matter at all. And here a footnote. This led Dr. Johnson, in course of a conversation upon the subject, truly and wittily to remark that the dean and chapter have the same right of choice whether they will grant the royal request by returning the individual whom they are desired to elect, that a man thrown out of a window has to choose whether or not he will fall to the ground. In Ireland, the form, or rather farce, of conge de eslerie is dispensed with, the appointment being made directly by the sovereign, which is certainly the more honest and straightforward course. Now, while the sovereign, or rather the prime minister of the day, has the exclusive appointment of all the bishops, we find that this important functionary can also, with the consent of Parliament, extinguish bishoprics. It must be fresh in the recollection of all that Earl Grey, some years ago, introduced and carried a bill by which 10 Irish bishoprics were annihilated. Nothing could more conclusively prove that the bishops of the United Church are creatures of the state and liable, consequently, like all other state officers, to be deposed of by civil enactment.